by the end of the week, he's out of here.
You wake me up for that? Come on!
Dewey Finn would have sold his soul for rock and roll, but nobody was buying.
You're an embarrassment. You're out.
Maybe it's time to give up those dreams.
Don't you miss rocking out? You're not a teacher, Ned. You're the cross-dressing incubus from Maggot Death.
Dewey, I'm not a satanic sex god anymore. I'm a sub, and soon I'll be a certified teacher.
Is this Mr. Schneebly?
I'm the principal here at Horace Green Prep, and we need somebody to start immediately.
So how much are we talking here?
$6.50 a week.
Hello, this is Ned Schneebly.
Everyone, I'd like to introduce Miss Dunham's substitute. This is Mr. Schneebly.
All right, look, I've got a hangover. Who knows what that means?
Doesn't that mean you're drunk?
No. It means I was drunk yesterday.
Now, at the most prestigious prep school in the country,
Yes, Tinkerbell.
That poster charts everyone's performance.
where the students are rewarded for following the rules,
What kind of a sick school is this?
he's going to teach them a lesson
There will be no gold stars or demerits.
that will rock their world.
It's called Rock Band.
Is this a school project?
It will go on your permanent record. Hello, Harvard, yo. You, what's your name?
Zach.
You ever play electric guitar?
My dad won't let me.
Zach,
Do not walk away from me when I'm talking to you.
what makes you mad more than anything in the world?
No allowance. Chores. Bullies.
All you bullies get out of my way, cause I am really ticked off!
Mr. Schneebly, just wanted to say, that was a really cool lesson today.
Oh, thanks, dude.
All they wanted was an education.
They're gonna laugh at me.
You have an incredible singing voice. People are gonna dig you, I swear.
Okay.
What they got
Clear.
was a revolution.
I've just been informed that all of your children are missing.
And if you wanna be a teacher,
Jack Black, the School of Rock.
It will test your head and your mind and your brain.
And welcome to the Cult Cinema Circle podcast. My name is Jesse, and I'll be your host. Now, on today's episode, we're going to head over to this private school with a bunch of fifth graders, and, we're going to teach them a few things about rock and roll, and, also try not to, piss our friend off and his girlfriend more, I guess. But with all that being said, though, today, we're going to be covering a little film from 2003 to go along with our sort of back to school theme, if you will. We're covering School of Rock. And for me, I do not have a history with this movie at all. I only ever watched it recently, and I generally liked my time with it. This is a very much a Jack Black movie. I would argue it's kind of the movie that really made him hit at a certain point, and it kind of gave him a big break, if you will. I mean, I guess he did do stuff before, but this is him really this was made for him specifically. And so I think that's important to note. But I also think this movie also it's a cool little movie, and you see some familiar faces in it, and it's really cool to see where their careers have all gone and how they've been able to, Jack Black is his own person, I guess, but even some of the other people around this, it's just cool to see. And I also think this movie has a little something to say about, just what we think of with education and, all that kind of stuff, because it takes place in a school. And so I think that's kind of an interesting thing. But yeah, I don't really have much of a history or anything, so this is a new watch for me, and now I get to kind of look at this and be able to kind of analyze it, give my thoughts on it, and all that kind of cool stuff. So I'm excited to do that with you all. But as we normally do on the show, we're going to move into our figures of the film. We'll do a plot summary if you've never seen the movie, I guess. I mean, spoilers abound, I guess. But, if you're listening to this, you probably have seen the movie. But even if you haven't, and you don't care about spoilers, great. And, dissect some of these things and talk a little bit about it. So that's what we're going to do. So, to get down to those figures, this was released October 3rd of 2003 and runs at about 109 minutes. This was on a $35 million budget. And it made about $131.3 million. We'll get more into that a little later. And this was distributed by Paramount Pictures. So when it comes to some of let me get the box office information real quick. So we have, this actually came in at number 1, the opening weekend with $19.6 million. So not too shabby. Overall, it ended up making $81,261,177 domestically. Internationally, it made about $49,834,437 internationally, for a worldwide total, like I said, of about 131 million. So needless to say, this did pretty well in terms of that, which is great. Let's see what else was in the theaters at this time. So we have School of Rock, like I said. We had Under the Tuscan Sun. We had Underworld was out. It's kind of fun. Lost in Translation, Sofia Coppola movie. Let's see what else. One of the Pirates of the Caribbean, the Curse of the Black Pearl. I don't know which one that is, but tell me if you want. Cabin Fever was apparently still in theaters. I'm surprised by that, but okay, I see it. Freaky Friday was in theaters, actually. I wonder when it was his 9th week. Okay, fair enough. Finding Nemo was still in theaters. Okay, gotcha. Ooh, 13. Ooh, I love 13. That was its 7th week. Oh, yeah. Ooh, American Wedding. I haven't watched American Wedding in a minute. I've watched the first 2, and I watched American Reunion. I hate that movie. It's not good. But you know what? Oh, and let me tell you something. I was up in there for Spy Kids 3. Listen, is that movie good? I don't know about that. But my ass was up in there for that. It was in 3D, I think, bitch. Oh, listen. Freddy vs. Jason was still in theaters. It was in its 8th week. Hell yeah, I kind of like that movie, actually. Uptown Girls was in theaters in its 8th week. I have never seen Uptown Girls. Isn't that crazy when you think about it? Like, I know. What, am I even a Brittany Murphy fan? Like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm ashamed of myself, honestly. I'm just looking at some of the other things that were in. Oh, Bennett Like Beckham apparently was still. Okay, it's fair enough. Really, Party Monster was still in this. Oh, it had just come out. Really interesting. Huh. I'm just like literally going down this, and I'm just like fascinated with like what was in the box office. I mean, fair enough. It's 2003. We're it's not like we can really look at like what was going on at the time or whatever. This is post 9/11, obviously. So that's something to be said. Where a lot of that, but we're also just in like a more of a conservative regime a little bit. We were under a Republican president, and the second Bush, if you will, and we had all that going on. I myself was 11 years old when this was, this is out or whatever. So this would have made a whole lot of sense for me to go see, but I didn't actually see that. But in terms of Rotten Tomatoes scores, though, this comes in at 92% with about 199 reviews, so it is certified fresh, and it comes in at 64% from the audiences with about 250,000 ratings. Let's see what the critics' consensus is. So the critics' consensus is Black's exuberant, gleeful performance turns School of Rock into a hilarious, rockin' good time. That's fun. I like that. Yeah, I'll say that much. Yeah. Now, we got to talk about some of the people who were involved in this movie, of course. So this was directed by Richard Linklater, of course. So we know him from Dazed and Confused, which I've covered on the show before, but he also did the movie like Boyhood, which took place over the course of, I think, 12 years or something. Like, he literally shot it all that time, which is kind of crazy. But he also did things like the Sunrise trilogy, which is like Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and some other stuff. I don't actually know those very well. So there's that. And Before Midnight, I think. There's that I'm trying to look. Suburbia, I haven't seen that, but it's been on my list to watch. Slacker, I tried watching that, I'm not gonna lie to you, and I don't know if I didn't get through it, to be honest. So I don't know. And then Everybody Wants Some, I tried watching that and I did not like it. So maybe I'd have to try it again. Maybe I was just in a bad mood, I don't know, but all I know is I just didn't really care for it a whole lot. It's just me. It's always gonna be for me like Yeah, good old Days of Confused in a way. Even though people sometimes hate that movie, and I mean, sure, but yeah, I still like it. I don't care. Our writer of this movie is Mike White. So of course he did, Orange County, which I actually really liked. Orange County, I thought that was a pretty good movie. It came right out before this, and he was already friends with Jack Black anyway, because he had wrote the movie he was in before, so he already knew him and all of that. And he literally ended up writing this movie with him in mind. He also wrote Nacho Libre as well, which is I think a Nickelodeon movie actually. And then Jack Black would go on to do all the Nickelodeon Kids Choice Awards for many years, kind of like Rosie O'Donnell did back in the 90s. One of the first things I think he wrote actually was Dead Man on Campus, which is pretty much the movie The Curve with Matthew Lillard, but it's not a horror movie, like a thriller movie. This has more to do with just if your roommate kills themselves and you get a 4.0 the whole time or whatever, that kind of thing. I don't know how good it is, to be honest, but there's that. But obviously Mike White is a big deal right now because he is the creator, writer, all those things of the HBO series The White Lotus, which I have watched the first season of and the third season of. I have not watched the second season though, but whatever, I'll get around to it. But I think it's interesting. We also queer writer, because Mike White is a bisexual man and he literally has a boyfriend / husband, I think. So that's kind of cool to see that. So shout out, of course. Love that. I'm trying to think. And he also acts sometimes. He's in this movie, he's in Zombieland, he's in the Stepford Wives, whatever. That's all good. Scott Rudin did produce this. We don't really talk about the producers a whole lot. Scott Rudin is kind of an asshole, honestly, from what I've heard and all the news about him. So, we'll just move along from that. Our editor is a female editor. Her name is Sandra Adair. Some of the other things that she did, she is Richard Linklater's editor. She did the Sunrise trilogy, or the Before trilogy, or whatever they call it. So she's done a lot of his films, TBH. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. Makes enough sense. Keep the same people around. It makes a whole lot of sense. And then also our cinematographer is Rogier Stofers. I don't know if that's how you say it, but he's Dutch. So any Dutch listeners, please let me know, tell me how to say it phonetically. But he shot Disturbia with Shia LaBeouf. He also shot The Vow as well, and Borderlands, which is, I have not seen that movie, but I've heard it's not good. That's an Eli Roth movie based off of a video game. And The House with Clocks in Its Walls, I believe, which is another Eli Roth movie as well. But he also shot Enough, the J-Lo movie where she beats up her abusive husband. I don't actually know what happens in that movie, but that's what I assume happens, or that's the vibe I get, if anything. So, hey, I'm not mad at that. Who did the music in this movie? Let me look real quick. I'm just on Letterboxd looking at this stuff. Makes enough sense. Craig Wedren, I guess. He did this, but he also did Velvet Goldmine, which I started watching and then I kind of fell off of it. But I'll still watch it. It's fine. It's cool. He did Wet Hot American Summer. Okay, that makes sense. And what was some of these other ones he did? Oh, he did one of the Reno 911 movies. Oh, okay, that makes sense. Oh, he did Oregon Trail? Oh, you know what? I think it might be because wasn't he a part of the... I don't actually know this, and I'm pulling it completely out of my ass, but wasn't he also in The State or something like that? He might have been, actually. Let me look at that real quick. Let me see if I can find that. I think he might have been, actually. No, he was just a musician dude, but I feel like he was friends with them, right? Or something like that. He must have been, or something. He did a few different things, but he's done some TV. He did Hung, United States of Terra, Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23, that kind of thing. So yeah, that makes enough sense. All right, I feel like I've heard his name before, so that makes sense to me. Oh, you know what I've heard his name from? This is why. He did a bunch of the stuff from Yellow Jackets. He literally was a part of doing the theme song for that. That's how I know his name. God damn it. There you go. Look at that. And he's a cancer survivor too. That's nice. Good for him. Yeah. Oh, you know what? Oh, okay. I figured it out. I know where he got from the state because he has been married to Thomas Lennon's sister since like 2006. They must have known each other back in the day. Oh, he wrote the theme and was a regular extra on The State. So there you go. Okay, that is why he was in that is why he was in those movies. He was in Reno 911 for that. He was in all that. Okay. We got down to it. I'm glad we were all able to figure this out. That's all fun and well. But I'm trying to think what else there might be to talk about. Not really a whole lot else that I can think of in terms of other people, but gotta get to this cast, of course. So Jack Black is our main character, of course, of Dewey Finn. He is, of course, from like High Fidelity, but he was also in like the Kung Fu Panda movies. He was in the Super Mario Brother movie. He's in the Minecraft movie, all these things. So he's definitely gone on and kind of made a niche for himself and what he can do, if anything. I like in a funny way, like Kylie Roseanne or Haunted Hippie on YouTube, who I like her content. He's also R.L. Stein in the Goosebumps movies, which is kind of interesting. But she talked about how she loves School of Rock, but I like her comment on her Letterboxd review where it just says Jack Black would she said something to the, what is it? Hold on, I gotta look at it real quick. It's Dewey Finn would have hate what Jack Black had become, and you know what? I kind of get it. I see that. But he is still very important when it comes to just being this kind of average weird dude who ends up being able to make something, and that's kind of really cool. So, I'm not completely mad at that. I can't say I've done a deep dive on Mr. Black himself, in terms of like whether I like him or not. He's, I watched Orange County, for example, and he was fine in it. He's cool, I was really a lot of there for Skylar Fisk, honestly. I'm not going to lie. But that's just me. But yeah, so that's what we're talking about with that. Joan Cusack is in this movie. She plays Rosalie, who is the principal of, where the hell is, what's the name of the school? If I can remember it real quick. I don't remember the name of the school. We'll get to that in the plot summary. But yeah, she is, of course, an icon legend, sister to John Cusack, of course, which, if you didn't already know this, John Cusack was in High Fidelity, which also had Jack Black in it. But you have her in, she was in the Toy Story movies because she plays, I don't completely remember who she plays in that. I'm trying to kind of remember, but I can't. Oh, she's Jessie. Oh, look at that, Jessie. I love that. Good for her. Good name. Anyway, she's also in 16 Candles. She is in Working Girl, which I think she got nominated for an Oscar for. She's in Runaway Bride. Oh, I remember that. Okay. Of course, she's in In and Out. I love In and Out. And obviously, Debbie Jelinski. Come on now. Ice Princess, of course. She plays the mom to Michelle Trachtenberg, rest in peace, all the things. So yeah, she's an icon. We gotta love her and stand her, obviously. I already talked about Mike White. He plays Ned Schneedley. Okay. We already talked about him, so we don't gotta talk about him no more. Sarah Silverman is in this movie. She was in Heartbreakers. She was in Don't Look Up. She is the voice of Penelope, I think, in Wreck-It Ralph and stuff. So that's kind of fun. People have their thoughts and opinions on Miss Silverman, and again, haven't gone the deep dive of her. I'm not gonna lie, I did like her stand up here and there back in the day. I'm not gonna lie, it was like her, Kathy Griffin, Margaret Cho, all of them's, Wanda Sykes, throw her in there too. I loved it. But nowadays I'm kind of like, oh girl, this is, I could definitely understand it when it comes to, because I don't condone her use of some of these racial slurs and stuff like that. And I can understand when people have a problem with that, and even the way she was kind of using it before. I don't know. I completely understand why people have a problem with it. I'm not going to lie. So, and again, she's not somebody who, in my opinion, at least, I'm not going and actively looking for Sarah Silverman stuff all the time. I'm not going to lie. But again, I liked female comedians when I was a younger person, and I still like some female comedians, of course, but she's not one for me where I'm like, oh, I'm going to go look for her. I feel like there's people who, in my opinion, are a little bit funnier. But that's just me personally. But yeah. yeah, so there's that. We then have, I would say this is kind of a breakout role for her, is Miranda Cosgrove, iCarly herself. So she was, I know her as Megan from Drake and Josh because I'm that old. And I did not watch iCarly, but she's obviously well known for being iCarly. But this is before that. This is when she was this is right before she did Drake and Josh, really. So it's kind of cool. And when you hear in a movie that makes like $130 million, that's not too bad either. So that works out for me. But yeah, and I'm trying to think who else. There's a lot of these kids who are in this who play the classmates and like who play the kids in it. Some of them have gone on to do like random different things, but a lot of them have not necessarily. They haven't made a whole lot of. They haven't done a ton of other, things. Some of them have though, like, what was her name? Katie, I believe. Rivka Reyes. She was just in, this is a movie I was told to watch, Onyx the Fortuitous and the Talisman of Souls. She's apparently in that. And she's in The Merry Gentleman. That's fun. That movie is apparently bad, but oh yeah, it is kind of bad, isn't it? But whatever. And she was in One of Them Days. That's kind of fun with Keke Palmer. That's cute. I will say I liked, cause this kid only was in this movie, like literally, but like, I love the little kid Billy, who's the little kind of gay kid, who's like the stylist. I loved him so much. I'm not even gonna lie. He was so great. One of the other people in this too, Adam Pascal, of course, he plays Theo, who was in the band that Dewey gets kicked out of or whatever. He is of course from Rent. He was in the Broadway show, and he was also in the movie, and he's in this movie. He comes from like the background of having been in a rock band, so it makes enough sense. Actually, he was in SLC Punk. I always forget about that. I am gonna do that show. I'm gonna do that movie at some point. I love that movie. And I'm going to watch it again. It's been on my watch list forever to like watch again, right? And I was just like, why am I not doing this? But anyway, yes, he was in this before he was in School of Rock, which makes enough sense. Which obviously before that, he was in Rent. So like the musical or whatever. So yeah. And nobody else that I can really think of that I want to like. Apparently Nicky Katt's in this movie somewhere. He plays a guy named Razor. I don't remember who that is. But I do know who Nicky Katt is. And rest in peace, King. I loved him. He was in like Gregor Rocky's movies, and he was in like Dazed Confused, of course. Oh, of course. Also Amy Sedaris is in this movie for like real quick, but she is in there, which I can always get down with that. But yeah, so that's our cast and our crew and everything. But let's get down to, the basic idea you have to know about when it comes to this movie. Again, it was written for Jack Black in mind, so that makes enough sense. Mike White was actually inspired by the Langley School's Music Project, which, according to Wikipedia, is a collection of recordings of children's choruses singing pop hits from the Beach Boys, Paul McCartney, David Bowie, and others. And this was done in the 70s. And it became kind of a weird, like, fun cult hit. And it was like a successful example of like outsider music. So that's kind of fun. You can do all of your own research on that if you want to, because I'm not going down that rabbit hole. But just know that like this, the writer of this movie, Mike White, he was inspired by that kind of a thing. Apparently Jack Black once witnessed a stage dive gone wrong at a rock band called the Cults like show or whatever, which made its way into the movie in the beginning. This movie was shot around December of 2002, and a lot of these were actually shot in the New York area because this does take place in New York. The school portrayed as the School of Rock is actually Main Hall at Wagner College in Staten Island, and one of the theaters used in many of the shots was actually the Union City Performing Arts Center, which is in Rahway, New Jersey. Let's see what Wagner College is. So it's just a college in Staten Island, like I said. So I would assume anybody from Staten Island, I guess, tell me about Wagner College. Do you like it? Like, I don't know, like whatever. I've never been to Staten Island myself. So there's that. But let's get a little bit into our plot though, just to, so again, spoilers abound with this, but this is what happens in the film. Rock band No Vacancy performs at a nightclub 3 weeks before auditioning for the Battle of the Bands, as there's wont to do. The guitarist Dewey Finn, played by Jack Black, creates onstage antics, including a stage dive that abruptly ends the performance. And the next morning, Dewey wakes in his apartment, or the apartment of his friend Ned Schneebly, played by Mike White, the writer of the movie. He lives there with his girlfriend Patty DeMarco, played by Sarah Silverman. They inform Dewey that he must make up his share of the rent, which is 4 months overdue. And when Dewey meets No Vacancy, his band, at a rehearsal session, he discovers that he's been replaced by another guitarist named Spider, who the guy who plays Spider, I think actually became, he's not an actor director. He's not an actor model anymore. He used to be. He's now a lawyer in Texas somewhere. So you can go down that rabbit hole if you want to as well. I did a little bit, but not enough to like recall things, but it was interesting. Anyway, while attempting to sell some of his equipment for rent money, he actually gets a phone call from Rosalie Mullins, played by Joan Cusack, the principal of the Horace Green Prep School, inquiring for Ned about a short-term like sub position. And desperate for money, Dewey impersonates Ned, and he is hired. And on the first day of school, Dewey adopts the name of Mr. S, and he spends his first day just behaving erratically, confusing the class, because obviously the class has never met Mr. Schneebly before, so this is who they have. The next day, Dewey overhears a music class that the kids go to and plans to form them into a new band to audition for Battle of the Bands. He recruits Zach Mooneyham as lead guitarist, one of the kids, Freddie Jones as drummer, cello player Katie, that's that Katie girl, on bass, Lawrence on keyboard, and himself as the lead vocalist and guitarist. And he assigns the rest of the class to like various roles of like background singer and like groupie, I guess, and also a roadie, with Summer Hathaway, who is Miranda Cosgrove, as the band manager. The project takes over normal lessons, but helps the students to embrace their talents and like overcome their own problems. He reassures like Lawrence, who is like an Asian kid in his class, who's worried about like not being cool enough for the band. Zach, who's overbearing father, disapproves of rock and roll and stuff, and even Tamika, who is an overweight girl who is too self-conscious to even audition as a background singer, even though she has like a fucking great voice. So during one eloquent lesson, he teaches the kids that rock and roll is the way to, quote, stick it to the man and stand up for themselves. And band groupies, quote unquote, because this is a PG movie. I think it's PG-13 actually, but there's that. Michelle and Elaney, with Summer's approval, they pitched the band name of the School of Rock. So 2 weeks into his hiring, Dewey sneaks his bandmate members out of school to go audition for part in the Battle of the Bands, while the rest of the class maintains the cover at the school so that nobody knows that they're gone or whatever, right? But when Freddie wanders off to go hang out with these other people at the band thing, Dewey retrieves him, and the group is rejected because the bill is full. It's just, you can't put no more in there. So after Summer tricks the staff into thinking they all have a terminal illness, okay, because that's what you got to do. She was a resourceful 10-year-old. I like that. The band is auditioned. So the next day, Mullins checks in on the, teaching progress, forcing Dewey to actually teach the material, because that's what you do as a school. And Mullins explains that a parents' night will actually take place at the school this day before the Battle of the Bands, which kind of worries Dewey. And so as Dewey prepares for the parents' night, Ned receives a paycheck from the school via mail when, he's not supposed to, because he's not working at that school, realizing that Dewey actually impersonated him. And during the parents' meeting, the parents question whether, what is Dewey teaching their kids, until Ned, Patty, and the police come and confront Dewey. And after Mullins asks, like, hey, what's going on? Because also at this time, like, you see that, like, Dewey and Mrs. Mullins, or Miss Mullins, I guess, they kind of like have hung out a little bit, and they've been able to kind of get to know one another. And she even talks about like how she used to be fun, and all of this, and kind of talks to him about that, which is interesting. And we'll talk about that a little bit, I'm sure. But anyway, he reveals his true identity that, he is this guy. He's not a certified teacher. He flees back to his apartment, which is really Mike White's apartment, but whatever. Which is really Patty's apartment, probably, really. Him and Patty get into an argument, though, until Ned intervenes. But then he tells him, like, hey, Dewey, I think you need to move out, pretty much. The next morning, the parents are in an uproar in front of Mullins at her office, while the kids decide not to let their hard work go to waste, though. When the new substitute discovers that the kids are missing, she informs Miss Mullins, who takes the parents to the competition. And a school bus comes to pick up Dewey, who leads the kids to the Battle of the Band, and decide that they play the song that was written by Zach earlier instead of the one that they were doing before, pretty much. All the while, Ned breaks up with Patty after he finally stands up for himself, and Dewey by walking out of the apartment to go see his friend perform. And initially dismissed as a gimmick, the band wins over the entire crowd, and no vacancy, the old band ends up winning to Dewey's dismay, but the audience chants encore for the School of Rock, having the band play one more time. And sometime later, we don't know exactly how long, but an after-school program known as the School of Rock has opened as Dewey continues to coach these kids that he's played, while also Ned is teaching some beginners, which is fun, as the end credits roll over that, which I thought was very funny, and I enjoyed that. So, yeah, that's pretty much the idea, the plot of the School of Rock, if anything. But yeah, I think in terms of this movie, though, I think it's important to kind of, look to see, like, this is something where, this is early 2000s. I think you have this kind of interesting mix of, like, you have something like pop punk, which is right like on the cusp of this, right? Which is just really interesting. MTV is something that is, kind of still around, but it's not as huge as it used to be. It's turning more into reality a lot of the time. And as somebody being there, like, I can tell you that that's a habit. Absolutely. So it's kind of interesting to really look at that and to see, like, what's going on with kind of music at this time. You know what I mean? Like, you had the boy bands, you had the, something like Spice Girls, or even some of the girl groups, right, from the 90s. And some of them have gone into the 2000s. But even that, like Justin Timberlake, for example, is gone solo by this point, and there's a lot more kind of going on with different things. And like I said, something like pop punk is also having its own thing too. Whereas you had, like, definitely had punk before, you had different things like that, but kind of a mix of the two, where it could then, now you have things like, Panic at the Disco, you have Fall Out Boy, you have Paramore, all these things that are just starting to kind of bubble up, if anything, and then they'll hit later on the 2000s. I can tell you that much, if anything. But yeah, I do think, like, in this, though, like, I don't know, it's just interesting to kind of look at it and to see that kind of to see that sort of thing happening. But this is right before that, where this movie kind of lies, if anything. So yeah, I think that was kind of interesting, though, and this is the thing is that Dewey as a character, he is so interested in just, rock, right? And he's so interested in wanting to try to stick it to this proverbial man, right? Like, that's the whole kind of thing that he kind of has, right? Which I just think is kind of interesting. But, like, ultimately, like, rock is still around, I guess, but it's waning, it's not the new thing anymore. Pop punk, like I said, is on its rise. Rap music has also become something different as well, and will also have that. At this time, you still have, like, Drake is Aubrey Graham, right? Like, he's still on Degrassi at this point, I think. So they have that, but it's kind of interesting to look at, like, something where, it's not that rock isn't around, it just looks different now. It just looks quite a bit different. But yeah, but I think talking about, like, this, I do think, like, in this situation, I do think that this is a more fleshed out character for Jack Black being Dewey, because he is he's playing this like slacker loser character, which he kind of did in Orange County too, but he becomes this unlikely mentor, really, which I kind of enjoy. Like it is very much like the guy who is like, he's lying and his lie is going to get found out and all of this stuff. But, you know, he does this in a way where, I mean, it's really bad when you think about it. You're just like, oh my God, this strange man is like in this school, just like teaching quote unquote kids, but what is he teaching them? But it's kind of interesting though. And I think also too, like he is teaching them a little something different, if anything. And, you know, it's not all about just like, you know, this thing of the teacher should inspire the students to like be able to learn and have an inquisitive mind or whatever. You know, I think he's just doing that in a different way, really, you know, and that's kind of what we're getting from this. And ultimately, like Dewey's character, really, because he is kind of the main point. I mean, to be honest with you, like Ned and Patty, they are not really characters like in this movie a whole lot, because they're not really in it a whole lot. You know, really more so the people in this movie that I care about are Dewey, is Rosalie, Joan Cusack, and also the students. Like that's what I kind of care more about, because that's kind of the heart of this movie, if anything. So it's more interesting to look at them and to be able to see that, you know, in all this. But I think a big thing of this, if we're talking about just like themes of this movie in particular, it's kind of this idea of rebellion versus conformity. And I think that in this situation, that is really what Dewey and Rosalie really show. Because Dewey's all about rebellion. He's a rock person. He's a rock star in his mind, right? And he is so about just like sticking it to the man, being different, not wanting to sell out, all this kind of shit, right? When really he is living in his friend's apartment. He's 4 months behind on his rent. He thinks he's going to hit it big. And honestly, that's not fucking happening. Okay. So there's this rebellion there, right? And that's fair. You know, he wants to be this artist. He wants to be this thing, right? But ultimately, like, how fucking often does that happen? Not a ton. And not especially for people who are Jack Black, who look like Jack Black, you know, all that kind of stuff. So he has kind of this thing. And in a way, this is a reality check for him to be able to be like, oh, maybe there is something a little different. And oh, hey, maybe these kids have something to offer, you know, and maybe I'm able to see them like do this music stuff, right? And that's something I'm interested in. And you know what? Maybe that's what we can get from this, because I sure as hell can't teach you math a whole lot, right? But I can teach you about music. I can teach you about what I love. And that's what I'm interested in doing. So yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. So rebellion is definitely what we're looking at with Dewey. And then with conformity, because again, like as a teacher, you have to conform. You know, you can still be a caring teacher. You can be somebody who really wants to help teach people, but ultimately you do have to conform to a certain standard to be able to do that kind of job. It's like any of us having a job, really. It's you have to sort of you have to try to conform sometimes because ultimately, like, it's a compromise, you know, in that way. And also, especially with teaching, not that I myself am a teacher by any means, but I also think like there's so many targets on educators' backs, and it's so fucking easy for somebody to assume ill intent with a teacher, or to want to just police what a teacher is teaching, or any of these things. And it's so fucking crazy, and it can be maddening. You know, it's not easy to do that job at all. And so it's something where that's a whole other conversation. But I think with conformity, like Rosalie as the principal, she is kind of that. She is somebody who is very type A. She's a little bit anal retentive, I guess, right? And she is somebody who is the disciplinarian of this place. Like, you know, she even says that. And I don't think she likes being that, but she kind of knows she has to because of the position she's in. And even with her conversation that she has with Dewey when they go out for beer, for example, and they're talking to one another. He finds out that she likes Stevie Nicks, and like, you know, has done a whole thing where she was like, you know, singing, like, you know, doing that stuff, and she can cut loose. And she talks about that too. She talks, like I said earlier, like she talks about this, and, you know, but she knows. I remember it's when they go back to the school and they're in his van, and she's talking about like, I used to be fun. I used to be this way, and I can't do that anymore because I'm in this job. I'm in this thing. And because of that, I have to be this certain way that's not me, but it has to be. I have to be this thing because I'm this thing. And, you know, that is just something that I think a lot of people can understand and a lot of people can feel, you know, and that's just something that happens, man. And it's just as annoying as it can be, you know, of course, but, you know, it's just something that does happen, you know. And coming down to like authenticity and just like your own self-expression. I mean, again, that's the thing, is that it's like Dewey is so like authentically who he is, whether anyone likes it or not. And I think also he is able to foster that with these kids in a way that he's able to say, hey, no, Lawrence, like you are cool. Like you are, you know, you just have to believe it for yourself, kind of a thing. Or telling like Tamika, like where she says like, well, I'm fat, like this, that, and the third. But like, he's like literally like, excuse me, you have like an amazing voice. Like, so who cares? Do you ever hear of Aretha Franklin? Like, come on now. Like, you know, you have a great, amazing voice. Like, you know, there's that. And I think that's important to be able to, especially when you're talking about like being a teacher, helping to, mold young minds or whatever the hell, right? You know, or being able to teach people these things, or teach children, especially whether it's elementary, middle, high school, any of this stuff, even for God's sakes, college. Like it's still a whole thing of like, you know, you're trying to mold these minds, right? You're trying to help them to be inquisitive, to be able to educate themselves, and to have that kind of brain power, if anything, hopefully. And you're fostering that as a teacher. That is a big part of that. So, you know, but I think he brings that out in some of this. And again, I think also he, in a way, like helps Rosalie do that a little bit, you know, where in a way it's nice because like she's also able to, she knows that she isn't the same way. She understands that, and she's able to say that, right? And I think if anything, hopefully that just means that she can cut loose a little bit, and that's okay. And it's fine to do that. You have to do that, I feel like, you know, especially when you have a job like that is so stressful and you're the principal, you know, you have to know when to, you know, suit up, do what you got to do, all this, but then also like you have to know when to cut loose. And I think if anything, hopefully Rosalie learned that, you know, through this experience and being able to be exposed to, you know, what Dewey was doing, also what these kids were kind of doing with him, and, you know, all of this. And I think that's interesting. Well, and I also think too, like, you know, like there's this something to be said for like, you know, just unconventional teaching too, you know, and this idea that like, it's not all the same, right? Like, you know, I think we could go down a rabbit hole of like how there's plenty of people who say when it comes to education, like the education you get in compulsory school, right? In high school, all these things, right? Like it doesn't prepare you for the real world, quote unquote, right? And all these different things and whatever. But ultimately, like, I think the big thing is that, I mean, sure, okay, yeah, but I also think it's important, and the bigger thing I feel like for especially that compulsory education is more so being able to really foster a certain level of inquisitiveness, of being able to question things. You know, I think that's a huge part of any education we have, which is why, you know, it's not necessarily important for you to, you know, do all of this like super higher education or whatever. I'm somebody who went to college and all of that stuff. And I got my little bachelor's degree that's sitting, you know, like, I don't know, like 30 feet away from me or whatever. And and like it's just sitting dust all over it. But like literally, like I don't know, like, do I feel like I needed it? Maybe not, but I'm glad I have it. It was something that was important to me. You know, it was something where nobody in my family like that had gone to college before. And I thought that was something that was important for me to do and that I wanted to do. And that's what it should be, is that it shouldn't be a thing of you feel obligated to do this or you feel pressured into doing this. It shouldn't be that. And I think that's what education in general should be, is that it helps you to question. It helps you to be inquisitive. It helps you to do that. That's the big thing about what teachers do, in my opinion. You know, yes, they will teach you reading, writing, arithmetic, right? Like yes, sure. Okay, great. But like, I think the bigger thing is like also trying to connect this to you and what does this mean for you, and being able to make things interesting to you, you know, and that's the big thing about it. And I know that sounds maybe selfish when I say it or whatever. I don't really know, but like, I think that's the big thing, because you know, you're going to have people who either, you know, really latch to that, and that's awesome. You know, people who won't. And the thing is, it's a matter of being able to help somebody understand or to figure out how you can make something make sense for another person. No two people are the same, and no two people learn the same way all the time. So I think that's important too. But yeah, I do think it's really interesting to kind of to see that and see that that's what's really going on with this, honestly, right? It's really interesting to kind of see that, if anything, and to just know like, okay, this is what this is, right? And that's exactly what's going on here. And yeah, I just think that's something where, you know, I think also too, like there is this sort of rigid thing about like when we're talking about the students too, like it's these different sort of diverse personalities that they all have. You know, Summer is very much this type A person. So of course she's band manager, right? The little boy who's like kind of like a little fruity, right? Like he probably, you're tacky and I hate you, right? Very much the gif people love from this, right? And, but in this situation, like he wants to be the stylist, he's doing that, and you know, is it a little dated? Maybe, perhaps, but I'm not really taking it that fucking seriously, to be honest. But I think it's funny, like that's cute, you know. You know, there's the one kid who is really into like the lights and stuff, and he does all of the lighting and whatever, and that's really cool. You know, it's being able to kind of have these different personalities and these different hidden talents that they all kind of have, which is really cool, you know. And I think also too, like this is a prep school. This is something where, you know, when I think about this, like, you know, that just wasn't my experience, right? I went through public school all 12 years of high school, you know, 12 years of high school. Wow. But like, you know, 12 years of schooling, it was all public. You know, I went to a community college for 2 years, you know, and then I ended up going to a private school for another 2 years, when I was in college. And, you know, there's this thing of like, you know, what are we even doing when it comes to these prep schools, right? And I think we could also go down the rabbit hole of that too. But like, the thing is that when it comes to this, it's like, there is this rigid expectation of what education is supposed to be. You know, I think they even say it in the movie where it's like, my parents don't pay $15,000 a year for, you know, us to do this stuff, but whatever, right? And it's just like, that breaks my brain in a way where I'm just like, wait, what? Like, how even do you do that? But anyway, it's like, it's this thing, but there is this rigidness there. And especially, I would argue that, not that I've been through private education like that within my compulsory education, but like, there is that rigidity. It just is, because people are paying money. They want the best education, quote unquote, you know, and it almost feels like sometimes, depending on the parents, perhaps it can almost feel like, in a way, you know, they want this elite education. And then what does that do? It just fosters elitism. It fosters thinking you're better than other people. Do you know what I mean? And I don't think that's necessarily something we need to be doing a ton of. Honestly, I really don't think so, because again, look at where we're at right now. Okay. Like, this is just something, and where we've always kind of been, but like, just thinking you're better than somebody is not helping anything. Right. And when you also think about that on like a national scale, or you think about that like in any way, it's, we're all just humans, right? Like, it's all just a thing of like, we all learn differently. The history is history, and some people want to almost rewrite it in a way, or just ignore like it's never happened and whatever the hell. And that's crazy. But like, it's literally just like, I just can't wrap my brain around like private school stuff, or I guess I can to a point, but then I'm just like, does that not just like lead to somebody thinking they're better? Like, how could it not? And you almost have to unlearn that in a way. I really do think so. Just like how with anything, having to unlearn, like if you were raised somewhere where people were more racist, right? Like, you have to unlearn that, or if people were homophobic where you were, and that's kind of how you grew up a little bit, you have to unlearn that. Or the way that you act towards people who are femme presenting and who are, women. You have to unlearn these things like misogyny and all this kind of shit. You have to. And because if you don't, like, again, right now, at least in our current day and age, like, it's almost just like, that's just the loud people who just think they're right and whatever the hell and all of this. But it is important to unlearn that sort of stuff, because it's not going to do good for anybody, truly. But you have to unlearn it sometimes, because it is learned a lot of the time, that kind of stuff, that deep-seated hate and all of this stuff. I don't think hate is inherent in everybody. I think it's very much taught, in my opinion. You can argue with me in my DMs, I guess. I don't really know. But, I think that is just something. Who knew I was going to go into all of this on the School Rock episode? I don't really know. But it just makes me think of that, because I can't help but think of it when I'm talking about this sort of thing, And I just think like it's just so interesting to think about that, and to really just see that like this movie ultimately is just trying to show that like, hey, look, like these kids have more to offer than, just being these dolls for their rich parents. Do you know what I mean? Like, these kids have more things that they could do, but nobody ever wants to believe them, or they don't want to. Maybe their parents are not aware of that until they're able to see it. And I think that's what's so cool about the end of this too, because like, Mrs. Mullins, like the angry mob of parents and the principal go to the show. They end up going and they get to see this thing, and they get to see their kids rock and perform, and they get to see them do this shit. And that's so awesome, because now they're able to see like right in their face. It slaps them right in the face. They're like, wow, my kid has, like, I didn't know my kid could even do that. Like, and that's what's so cool about it, is that, again, not a parent by any means, never going to be a parent, but it's one of those things where, that's the cool part about having a kid, or having somebody who is younger than you, who looks up to you like a parent or a mentor or whatever it is being able to look at them and be like, wow, I didn't even fucking know that they could do that, but that's fucking rad. Like, that's cool, and that's awesome. Like, that's so good. Like, I love that. And, I think in this way, like, that's why I think this movie in particular, like, it's something where it can be a little bit like, family friendly, or it's very much supposed to be that way. In my opinion, it's supposed to kind of be that way. But I think that's why I kind of liked it, because overall it's just something where it's this thing of being able to, learn something that isn't just the normal, like, here's what you go to school for. You're able to kind of learn different things, right? And you're able to do different things with that. And it's cool. Like, and it's just something where I think it's important to, just if anything, like it's having that fun little, like, again, sticking it to the man is one of the big things, right, in this movie. And like one of the big things that Jack Black wants to like enforce these, or it wants to reinforce for these kids in a way, or being a rebel in a way. And, you know, for as much of a rebel as a 10-year-old can be, I guess, but I do think it's really interesting to just see, like, yeah, like it's being able to just rebel a little bit and to go outside the box a little bit and have that kind of fun for this, really. And these kids, in a way, they get to have their own sense of agency in a way, which is really cool. You know, Tamika gets to feel better about herself, you know, because she has a really cool voice. She's such a good singer. And she can feel better about her body because, you know what, like there are going to be big girls, but you know what, maybe you can fucking sing though. And that's awesome. You know, Zach, he has this kind of dad who doesn't believe in him. And like, he does guitar, but his dad doesn't really think much about like, you know, rock and roll or whatever, but that's what Zach's interested in. And, you know, he's dealing with that authority from his parent, like his dad especially. But the thing is that like, he gets to learn that like, no, it's cool for me to like rock and roll. And it's cool for me to want to play this like guitar or whatever, and the bass or whatever. Right. And seeing that. And like Lawrence, for example, you know, he's also another kid of color. He's an Asian kid. And so, you know, also just looking at his own confidence, and nobody ever talks to him, and I don't remember if he's newer to the class or not. I don't remember that, but like, it's one of those things where like, he's able to also, because someone like Dewey is able to reinforce that in him, he's able to feel better about himself, and he's able to gain more confidence. And I like that these kids are kind of framed as whole characters, and they're not just props, you know. And again, it comes down to like, Dewey really sees these kids as full people, and you know, which their parents maybe don't always see. And it's not until it's kind of put right in their face that like, hey, your kids actually they do different things, like they're maybe interested in different stuff, and that's really cool to me. Like, you know, and I think that's something, if anything, you know. And I think also too, like this movie in particular, you know, it's been able to kind of have this like, you know, following this legacy. You know, there was a Broadway musical of it, you know, so that means that there's been plenty of different probably regional productions and like, you know, small town productions or whatever. And again, because this story is just something that people can get behind. You know, it's a story of being able to rebel a little bit against the man, right? And being able to do that and also help kids to know that like, it's okay to be a little bit weird. It's okay to rebel a little bit, and it's fine with that. And plus also, I will also say that this movie really did, in a way, kind of, I mean, it did have an influence on music education, really. Not saying that like every music educator like is now implementing what School of Rock is, but I mean, for God's sakes, like how many times have you seen a School of Rock, you know, in your local area or something, where they kind of do that same thing. They teach you how to like be a rock star, quote unquote. And it's like a fun little after activity or something. But where the fuck do you think that started? This is a big part of it. Like, it just is. Like, it's a huge part of it. And this just is something that you're able to kind of look at and be like, yeah, I think that became a little bit more of a household thing than after this movie came out, really, which is just interesting to me. And yeah, and being able to like just discover different rock music and different rock, like because Dewey has the whole like history lesson about like different rock bands, which is fun. But yeah, I think like even kids, you know, this was definitely made for a kid like me, right? Like or people within my generation. But it's interesting to also look at something like Gen Z or whatever, and to see that like, no, they also like this movie, like they also are into it. And you know, there was a Nickelodeon show, you know, that I think it lasted a few seasons, actually, weirdly enough. I'm not gonna lie, I did not watch it for this podcast, okay? I'm so sorry. But and I don't even know, like, is it still on Paramount Plus, maybe? I don't even know. You know, they take things off of there, okay? Listen, but in this situation, like, you know, that's all fine and well, but it obviously had to mean something to people, you know. And I think also, like, say what you will about, like, I guess Jack Black, but as I stated earlier, this really did make him a household name. This really, because before this, he was in, like I said, Orange County, he was in High Fidelity, he did a few things here and there, but this really kind of gave him the ability to just jump and really kind of go into what he would then end up being. He would do the thing with like the Kids' Choice Awards, he'd be Kung Fu Panda, and he did that for fucking ever, right? And then he just has been able to kind of ride that wave, which is interesting. And I just think that's kind of cool. And yeah, this movie, it makes sense to me that people still like it. There's a certain comfort to it that people really enjoy. And that if anything, like, this is just something where, I even having watched the movie, I think I gave it a 3.5 out of 5, because for me, at least, like, looking at it, I was like, you know what, like, there is something to be said for this. And I was thinking about, like, even after it, when I watched it, I was like thinking of things to talk about on this podcast and how to kind of look at it. But yeah, this is trying to say something a little bit more about just like what we think of when it comes to education. What do we think of when it comes to, how do kids learn and how do they want to learn? And is there a certain way of learning, or can we do different unconventional methods, and what does that look like? And what does that mean? And, and then also just thinking about kind of the rigid structure of school, especially at private school, like this prep school, and I think that was a big thing too, that I kind of, in my brain, I just couldn't kind of shake that in a way. And it was just something where, I like to hopefully think that I said what I wanted to say in this. I don't think there's that much more that I could kind of pull, but if anything, like, it's just something where I do think it's important to, I think this movie is really cool, and I liked it. I think it's something where if you want to show your kids this when they hit a certain age, I don't think that's a problem really, or if they liked the Nickelodeon show or whatever it is, and I think this was a cool time. And, I thought, like, well, why the hell not? Like, I wanted to do kind of a back to school theme, so I decided I was going to do that, and I decided that. And I think this kind of fits right in there, really. And, I hope, if anything, like, it still is something that people enjoy, and Gen Z still likes, people of my age still like, and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's just cool. So yeah, I think that brings us to an end, though, on the School of Rock. Okay. I think we've stuck it to the man, as much as we've needed to, maybe. I think that's pretty good. So yeah, but I liked this movie. It was on Paramount Plus when I watched it. I think you can find it streaming some places. So, definitely, hit it up, for sure. I would recommend to do so. It's a fun little time, especially if you, maybe you've never seen it before. And you know what? I'll watch just about anything with Joan Cusack in, and I'm not going to lie to you. So yeah, why not? I'm going to do that. But I think that gives, again, ends on that. But as always, you can follow the show on social media, on Instagram and Blue Sky at Cult Cinema Circle. That will all be in the show notes below. You can also follow me on Letterboxd at Jesse Kremp, JESSEKREMP. Or I guess you can maybe look up Cult Cinema Circle and, like, I'll be on there somewhere. You can see all the fun movies I've been watching, and all that stuff. And yeah, if you're on your podcatcher of choice, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever the hell you get your podcast, go and give me a rating. 5 stars, 1-2 sentence review, things like that. It gets people to see the show, and it gets people to, hear my gay ass talk about movies. So that's cool. And then if you're, like, on listening to me on YouTube or something, or whatever the hell you do, you can, like, comment or, like, thumbs up or, like, whatever you do. All that cool stuff. But that gives us a close on School of Rock this week. But what are we talking about next week? So we're going to go 2 years later in this. And I decided for what would this be? Oh my God. I think it's the 20th anniversary, I guess it would be. Oh my God. I decided I wanted to pull up on a little movie that I remember the marketing for sure, but I had not watched it until very recently. And I decided we're going to go and play a little game of Cry Wolf, or Cry_Wolf for those who know. But yes, we're going to be hitting this movie up. This takes place at a boarding school, like, and it's like a kind of a horror movie, like whodunit kind of slashery thing. But yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit more next week. But yeah, so get your watches in of Cry Wolf. I don't think you really have to. You could watch the theatrical or the uncut version if you want to, whatever you want to do. But yeah, I think that's what we're going to roll up on next week. But I think with all that being said, everybody, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the Cult Cinema Circle podcast, and I will catch you all on the next one. Take care. Bye.